I call this April 27th meeting of the Newberry County School Board meeting to order. We have a quorum present tonight with all members present, and Mr. Hill, we are very glad to have you back with us tonight. And do we have any amendments to our agenda?
Madam Chair, I'd like to amend the agenda to have some discussion about our executive session. I know that the last couple of meetings it's been last on the list. Sometimes our executive session, I remember way back, Mr. Hill and yourself may remember some late nights. And I just want to make sure that we take into consideration that having it before our meeting, we have a definite cutoff time to be back in. But I don't know where you want to put that as a discussion item, if it's the will of the other board members, of course.
I had wondered why we moved it. We'd had no discussion about it, and we moved it last meeting and this meeting. So if we could discuss it sometime tonight, that'd be good. If we need to wait the next time, whatever you decide.
No.
Is that a second to the amendment?
Well, if you need one for it, we're just asking, however you want.
Okay. All right. Where do you guys think we need to put that?
Maybe right at the end where you have board discussion, see if there's anything else anybody has to say.
Okay. So after we come out of executive session, just do it right then? Okay.
It doesn't matter where. I just want to make sure that,
right.
that it's fully vetted before we make any major changes.
All right. Why don't we add it under right before we adjourn?
Okay.
We will discuss the time of executive session. All right, do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, and Mr. Curriton, you would lead us in our invocation, please.
All right, at this time, if you could just pause for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. One of my reasons for doing that was to give everybody a chance to reflect on their own personal needs, their own family needs. I also would like to say thank you to all the teachers, administrators, superintendent, board members, and to our students to continue fighting through the COVID-19, and want to say that we'll all get through this together. All right, thanks.
If you would all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I would like to welcome, of course, our district staff who's here and all those that are watching us online this evening, and our media that is also actually watching us online this evening. All right, and if there are no objections, the minutes of the March 31st, 2020 board meeting will be approved. All right, and our first action item is Dr. Carey with our 2020-2021 calendar.
Good evening, Chairman Metz and members of the board. In your packet, you will find a copy of each of our 3 drafts for the calendar, and our recommendation is draft number 2. We had a total of 28 votes for the calendars this year. We had 4 votes for draft 1, 20 votes for draft 2, and 4 votes for draft 3, even though draft 3 is a moot point because we won't have permission to start early. So by an overwhelming majority, draft 2 is the one that was preferred by all who commented, and that is what I bring before you this evening for approval.
Dr. Carey, on draft 2, is the only difference between that and draft 1 is when they have the spring break vacation?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
And then you said with draft 3, the difference was the start date.
Yes, yes. And I was very surprised that we didn't have more votes for Draft 4, or Draft 3, even though it was not something that we're going to be able to do anyway, because, of course, that would require approval from the legislature. But we were able to do things like put in a fall break and finish very close to 90 days in first semester and do some more innovative things that we've heard teachers want over the years, but it was still not to be. Most of the objections to it were that folks had planned vacations and trips, and the start date being earlier was going to prohibit them from being able to take those trips. So that's just something we need to keep, and I'll ask our principals to make sure their staff keeps in mind, too, that if we are given that flexibility, that we always maybe just plan a little bit ahead and try to end those things at the beginning of August.
Dr. Carey, several teachers I had spoken to said that they didn't understand why in October, well, in 1 week we have a day off for parent-teacher conferences, and the next week we have an election day off, so we have 2 4-day weeks put together. Why don't we combine those two?
Well, the rationale behind not having parent-teacher conferences that day before Election Day is that folks would go on trips, and then the parents that we would wish to have come in for conferences may not be there because they would be tempted to go on a vacation during that time. The other reason is a lot of folks like 4-day weeks back to back. We have some that really enjoy being able to have a little bit of a break, especially since we're not able to put a fall break in. That gives us a natural couple of weeks that are shorter than usual, which can be helpful when you're getting, into that Thanksgiving, Christmas stretch.
And you don't think they're disruptive? The parents tell me you have to find a babysitter, you have to make all those arrangements, and you turn around next week and you got to do the same thing again, too. And the teachers say every day you lose instruction is another day you're just behind it. So not pushing for it, just curious to know. You're saying that people take a vacation on Election Day or before Election Day?
Well, when you have basically it would be a 4-day weekend, I think there is a temptation there, and a lot of folks would want to go on a vacation. I know that back when we would have a professional development day between Election Day and a weekend, I remember as a principal going to Disney World a lot, and I know a lot of our staff did go out of town, and so then we have teachers who, say, oh, that would be a great time to go have a little fall break, but they can't partake in that.
So is it true that we've done that before and we've had a bad experience with it, based on what you're saying right there?
I wouldn't say it was a bad experience. I just think if we're wanting parents to come in and have that incentive to come and meet with teachers, if we do it when we have a 4-day break or a 4-day vacation, 4-day weekend, I think that will lessen our participation. That's just my thinking. We did have one comment in the 28 comments that we received. There was one comment about that, but that was it.
Okay. 28 votes. Is that a committee? Is that staff?
Kelly Ringer, it could be anybody. Kelly Ringer sent it out to the whole district, all district staff, and asked.
You only had 28 people?
Yes. Now, she sent it out on March 6th, so, there was a week where we were working under 2 weeks under, no, it would have been 1 week under normal circumstances, because that was the Friday before our last Friday in school. Right. So, I think once we ended up shutting down, folks had other things on their mind probably than giving feedback on a calendar. But you didn't have to be a staff member to provide feedback. The links were on the district website, so parents or anyone could go on and send that to Kelly.
The only thing I see that kind of bothers me, and you and I have had the discussion about early release dates for years, we're out for spring break, and then we come back and we got an early release date. We couldn't move that a little bit?
We maybe could. Let me tell you a little bit about the struggle with early release, and there are fewer of those this year in this calendar than there have been in the past. And we feel like it's important to have one after spring break because we're going to start testing shortly after that, so that's a good time to get everybody together and do some planning. However, our high school folks have made it very clear that we need to alternate when we have an early release day on an A day and then a B day. So it's not as simple as going in and saying, all right, it's going to be this Wednesday, this month. That's why you'll see.
The 21st would make it the same day.
We're just trying to make sure that we don't have students at our high schools missing the same classes over and over again in the afternoon. So if you get down into the weeds like I have to, you'll notice I do a whole A day, B day, for 180 days and make sure that if it's on A day 1 month, the next day it's
But
on a B
that
day.
makes sense. It just didn't, obviously, as I said, we discussed in the past, we come back from a holiday and bam, we have an early release or professional development. Well, we
Right.
I just don't like to see them so close together.
Right, I see what you're saying. There's a lot of moving parts, but it's definitely not perfect, I will
No,
tell you
and-
that
and I
up front.
didn't- And I hadn't even thought about the AB days.
And I just noticed you've got it actually on the calendar.
I didn't even-
I did just notice.
Yeah, that helped
Day-
keep me
she's got
honest.
A and
I,
B, So she's got it
I,
right there.
I have just started using readers. And I don't always have them on me, and I'll just be honest with you, I can't read that.
And a couple other things I just want to share with you, because these were concerns that were sent in, and we get these every year, and I just want you all to know the rationale for why we do things a certain way sometimes, and it's not because we're not listening. Overwhelmingly, our elementary teachers like to see us start in the middle of the week, like a Wednesday or a Thursday, because they say with the little ones, just starting on a Monday and going 5 days is very tiring for those children, especially as they're getting used to that routine of coming to school. The reason we start on Monday is because that's the earliest we're legally allowed to start, and that allows us to get as many days in first semester as we can. This year, we're getting 86 days in first semester. We should have 90. So if we started on Wednesday or Thursday, then we're looking at 80, 85, 84, and that's just not a trade-off we're willing to make. However, if we were able to start early, then we could alleviate that a little bit and maybe start on a Tuesday or a Wednesday and chop that off a little bit. So that's one thing. And the other thing is some folks don't, some teachers like the teacher work day or parent-teacher conference days with an evening followed by a morning. And the reason that we don't do that in the fall, and the other reason, Mr. Bledsoe, that we have parent-teacher conferences a week earlier, that way we had them later this year, and teachers said that it was too far after report cards that parents weren't as apt to come in. So that's why we wanted to have it another reason for having it that week earlier was because it was close to report cards, and then when the parents came in, they could get the report card from the teacher versus a week later. But the other reason is we have a lot of coaches in our district, of course, a lot of athletics, and when we have those parent-teacher conferences on a Thursday evening in the fall, our parents are missing out on speaking to football coaches, both JV, middle school, varsity. They're missing out on talking to volleyball coaches, possibly cross-country. And the evening is the most prevalent time for parents to come in. That's our busiest time. So as a principal, I always had a real issue with a parent coming in to see a math teacher, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, he's out there, he has a football game. And he needed to be at the football game, but I also felt like he needed to be there for parents. So the reason that we do it, and we learned from that this past year, we're not going to do it in the morning. We're going to start it at 12 in the afternoon and go into the evening till about 7:30. That way, parents can still come in the evening, and we just won't have that morning available. But we are able to do that in January because we don't have that same issue with the Thursday night. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit because that was something that some teachers had pointed out, that they would like to go back to that evening, morning in the fall as well as in the winter. Just want you to know the method to our madness.
I don't mean that from anything that I say or any question to sound a criticism. I appreciate what you do. To me, the most telling thing that you said is there were only 28 responses to it. So when I get an earful, I'm going to say, did you respond?
And I have a printout of all those emails, so if they say yes and you want to double check that, you can.
That's exactly right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All right, and are there any more questions?
All right, do I have a motion to approve the district calendar draft 2?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Miss-
Just for clarification, that was first read. Right? Yeah.
Correct.
Yes, that was. Thank you, Mr. Ham, that was first read. All right, Ms. Dowd, with the continuing resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Metz, Mr. Super, and members of the board. You have before you a continuing resolution for our operating budget. As I mentioned at our last meeting, we have been made aware that our legislature is planning to finalize a continuing resolution for the state's budget. Therefore, it is prudent for us to do so as well. What this means is that the budget that you approved for June 30th, for 1920 at our last June board meeting, will be the same budget that we will begin the 2021 school year with. This basic continuing resolution is very typical of what you're going to see other districts doing. I've been in contact with most, and we have been told by the School Boards Association that we could go ahead and proceed with getting one approved by our school board. And it basically just states that if we do not have a budget approved by the state by June the 30th, that we would also have our school district's budget be carried forward into the 2021 school year. It is, of course, a moot point if for some reason the state were to come in and approve a budget. That is very highly unlikely. They have not been in session and therefore have not been able to have any continuing discussion on a budget for 2021. I'll talk about what their plans are a little later whenever I have some more budget discussion, but obviously we're not going to have one, and we're not anticipating having one until the fall of 20 when they do come back in session. So we just need the board's approval to go ahead with our continuing resolution for our operating budget.
Ms. Dowd, one of the questions that I have that last year in our budget, we had authorized some additional monies for different positions that we had hired for last year. So what happens with that money in this budget this year? I mean, it just stays there?
It will stay there, but the other thing that will happen with expenditures is that we have teachers that get their, licensure increased, certification increased. So you're going to have teachers that go from a bachelor's to a master's and things like that. You're going to have teachers that leave and teachers that come in and out. So the bottom line is going to stay the same, but it's not necessarily going to be exactly the way it was, and we certainly would not consider any hires for that. Yes, ma'am.
So how will we handle just cost of living increases in contracts and step increases? We would completely ignore.
I can go ahead and discuss that now too.
Wait later, whatever.
It doesn't matter. It's pertinent to this, and we can go ahead and discuss it. The state has frozen the district salary, the school district salary schedule, the minimum salary schedule that they give us. They have frozen steps for teachers. So as far as cost of living or step increases for now, we will not do any of that until they come back and meet and give us a new budget that indicates we do have to do a step, and if there is a COLA, a cost of living increase at that time. When they come back, they are obviously going to have more information on how our health crisis has affected our economy and our revenues. And obviously there's some very, very major concern over that right now. And so there is no way that we would consider right now making any kind of changes, and obviously they've given us direction not to. One of the things that happened in 08-09 is that districts were told they didn't have to give a step, but you can if you want to. We obviously did, and that was a good thing. I think that was a good thing that our decision our board made, but there were a lot of districts that did not. It took them years to catch back up. Just recently, some of them caught up. I think they're trying to keep everybody on more of a level playing field as far as that's concerned, and not give districts right now the ability to give the step if they want to go ahead and give it, because quite frankly there are those that would like to, but they have been told that it is not allowed and it is frozen.
Okay.
Is there any more discussion?
Well, back to Ms. Lake's question about the hiring. If those things were hired, it's going to roll into this budget anyway. So
Well, I knew that.
obviously we wouldn't hire again.
No, we would not have any new hires, but you're right, that budget would roll into this year's
They
budget.
have
That's
been
right.
hired, and it's just going to roll
Yeah, we would not have any more new positions added just because that was in there. Mhm.
Do I have a motion to approve the continuing?
Make a motion to approve the continuing resolution.
All right, second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we move to our staff reports, and Dr. Carey.
Right, good evening once again. I just want to give you an update on instruction or continuity of instruction. Our senior packets, as we explained last board meeting, we have 2 packets that have gone out, Packet 1 and Packet 2. Both packets, as far as seniors or 12th graders are concerned, are due Wednesday and Thursday of this week, April 29th and 30th. And the principals have been calling, doing the robocalls to remind students and parents in 12th grade that those will be due at that time. And that gives our teachers 2 weeks to grade that by the May 15th deadline, which is what Molly Spearman had actually put in place or asked that we adhere to for seniors. So they will essentially be finished. We are bringing principals in tomorrow. We have a regular leadership team meeting, and we're going to discuss Packet 3. We talked about it in Cabinet this morning and feel like it's definitely something that we need to put out one last time, one more packet for our students to work on, and we'll talk with principals tomorrow about what that looks like and when it will be distributed. But we will make sure that it is due no later than May 15th, because if you look, and I'm sure you all heard Superintendent Spearman's press conference last week. She gave us that flexibility those last 2 weeks to bring teachers and staff in. If you look at our last day of school and or actually when our grades are going to be due, which is May 29th, if you look 2 weeks prior to that, that will be May 15th. So we're going to require that we get that 3rd packet in and any packet before that in by May 15th. We're being very gracious with our students. We have some who haven't turned in Packet 1 yet, although our principals said by and large they've had a great response and a great rate of having things turned in. And so they're continuing to call and follow up and say, don't forget about getting that packet in. So we're just asking students to make sure that, and this is our pre-K through 11th grade students, to get all 3 packets in by May 15th. We're not going to take points off if they don't get in before that or anything like that. Because one thing that has guided us through this whole process, there's this quote, and I don't know how many of you have heard of Dr. Brad Johnson. I follow him on Twitter. And he says, relationships before rigor, grace before grades, patience before programs, and love before lessons. And that's something we are trying to keep in mind as we talk about guidelines and policies for our students and teachers during this time. We also had an option that came down from the State Department for grades pre-K through 8 to do pass-fail, but we talked with all of our principals and we opted to stick to our numerical schedule, and of course for pre-K through 2 we're going to continue with our standards-based report cards. So our board policy is going to continue to be followed as far as that goes. We have been, Mr. Suber talks almost daily with the other superintendents from WEPEC, and then the instructional leaders have had several virtual meetings as well. So we've been hearing what other districts are doing, and a lot of them are doing the same thing. A few have opted for pass-fail, but most are doing the numerical scale. Let's see. And then we have come up with some grading guidelines that we drafted together with principals, and those were shared with teachers last week. And just some highlights from those: only one final semester grade will be reported, and that'll be for second semester. So everything that the students had turned in prior to the shutdown, as well as these 3 packets, will all be graded together as one semester 2 grade. And the 3 packets will all count as major grades. They will be graded, and they will count as major grades. Let's see. And we're, again, as I said just a couple of minutes ago, we're asking principals to continue to reach out for parents and get those packets turned in May 15th. We have not rolled out the 3rd packet yet. When we talk with principals tomorrow, like I said earlier, we're going to come up with some dates when that information will be due from teachers. We want to give them a good week to be able to get all of that together and then get it ready to be distributed to our students in time for them to have it completed by May 15th. I'm a little gun-shy as it comes to rolling this kind of thing out, because it seems like we tried to be ahead of the curve with the first 2 packets, and each time we did that, then the State Department came up with guidance a couple days later. So we do have a meeting with the State Department, all of the instructional leaders, Wednesday afternoon at 1 o'clock. So after we talk with principals tomorrow, I would like to wait until we have that meeting just to make sure there isn't additional guidance provided by the State Department that would contradict what we plan to do. But my plan is to early Thursday morning or Wednesday afternoon publicize our plan and get that out to our teachers and our parents and go from there.
Dr. Carey, I've had a couple of parents contact me. They've got high school and middle school students, not seniors. At what point is packet 2 due for those grade levels?
May 15th.
May 15th as well?
Yes, May 15th. We had a soft date of May 15th because when we set that, we didn't.
Packet 2?
That's for packet 2, yes.
Okay.
At that point, we didn't know. We were still hoping to come back to school May 1st. So that's where the May 15th came from.
I don't think these parents want kids to know that.
That's okay. Hey, whatever works for them,
Okay.
as long as we get it by May 15th.
All right, so all of these packets, 1, 2, and 3, are due by May 15th?
Yes.
So the grades
Yes.
can be done by the 29th?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
I continue to be concerned about the grading of the packets. If a child does very little work or practically none, could he get a 0?
I don't believe that that is a fair and equitable procedure for our students. The guidance that we received from the State Department, there were 4 bullets, or actually 5, that were outlined by Superintendent Spearman. I just want to read those. Complete the courses in which during the second semester, students should have the opportunity to complete courses in which they're currently enrolled. So we're doing that. Complete the courses in which they would have enrolled in during 4th quarter online, and that is something that doesn't apply to our students. Enroll in any credit recovery courses needed. And then here's the one that really has provided the blueprint for the decisions we make. Demonstrate mastery in an effort to improve a course grade. We have heard loud and clear that students should not be penalized. And one thing, another quote that has always been staying in the back of my mind, as with some of our principals, is before you give grades, tests, quizzes, assignments, ask yourself, does every child have equal access, opportunity, and support to do it? If not, then don't do it. So when I think about should we give 0s, does every child have equal access, opportunity, and support, I can't put my head on the pillow at night and say that they do. So that is why we are not advocating for 0s. Now, those students who do the packet, and we have gone over this with the principals, and they agree wholeheartedly, if a student does a packet with fidelity, they need to be rewarded for that. They should get a grade no lower than what they currently had before the shutdown occurred at interim. So if a student does it and does a good job, they should get a great grade, and that will help improve their average overall. So while we may not be giving a 0 because that would bring a student's grade down, we will actually be rewarding our students who do what they're supposed to do.
I don't really see it like that. In the last meeting, I said if we let the teachers be the subjective judge on what student could or could not do it. But I know some students that are knocking themselves out doing everything more than above what the teachers gave them to do, and some that hadn't done any of it and don't plan to. So how is that fair to the student, to the rest of the student body in the whole school district?
Well, it's fair to the student who did what he or she was supposed to do because they're going to be rewarded with a grade that is going to overall improve their average from where it was.
Well, most of them had 95s or 96s.
Well, maybe they'll get a 97. When you get to high school, every grade counts in that class rank race. So, you know, even if they go from a 97 to a 98, that's some more quality points.
But it's just not fair when you say, we're going to grade these packets, everybody's going to get a grade on it, we're going to treat everybody fairly, and then we're going to say, here's the bottom and here's the ceiling. And there's very little difference in it. I agree with you. I don't think it should be punitive. We're not out to punish anybody.
Right.
But when we don't even have people making an effort for it, we have other people disciplining. Like Jody says, parents are fighting with, get this work done. Come on, let's get it behind us. And some of them are, they're out to lunch.
Some of the parents are fighting with them, and some of the parents aren't doing anything.
That's exactly what one daddy told me the other day. He can't get his kid out of bed till 12 o'clock. So he's got a bigger problem in school right now.
And honestly, through this whole situation, there's going to be some freebies. We're going to have, you know, with this situation, we're going to have some folks maybe get a little extra than what they may have worked for or deserve. But we at least know as a school district, that we have not penalized anyone, and we have not taken the lack of equity that we do have across the district with the resources that they have at home and the support, that has not factored into it. And we've at least tried to level the playing field as best we can. I totally see what you're saying. I do.
One parent told me that COVID-19 has caused us to hire a whole lot more teachers, but a whole lot more of them have quit at home.
And if I may say, and I have been told this over and over and over, but I think we do have a lot of parents and a lot of grandparents that are doing, assisting with these lessons each and every day, who have a new admiration and appreciation for what teachers do each and every day in the classroom. But, Mr. Bledsoe, the other thing I would add to that child, first of all, and I think Dr. Carey has alluded to this, but what we have gotten back from the principals is that the rate of return on completed work has been overwhelming for the most part. But I would also, and again, I'm not going to assume, but you've got to think that a child that goes and does absolutely no attempt whatsoever, because we sent packets out, because we obviously all know that everybody does not have access to Wi-Fi. But I would assume that the majority of these children who are doing absolutely nothing and turning in no work, that the grade they had up to this point in the school year is probably going to reflect that in most cases, because they didn't just decide they weren't going to do work now. I don't know that they were doing a whole lot to start with.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand. I saw something on the State Department website that we're not going to let anybody drop below what their latest grade was. It was some terminology I hadn't heard. It was like
Grading floor.
Ceiling
grading
floor.
floor.
Yeah.
Yes. And so if a kid's going in, he has 75 average and comes in and his packet's a disaster, he's still going to get a 75.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I talked with a teacher just today, and the teacher told me, the teacher had some concerns about what we were doing, but then said when he started getting in and looking at the packets, you know, the one that was a disaster or was done halfway or just a very poor attempt, the student already had a 73. And the ones that came back knocking it out of the park were the kids who had, like you said, those 95, 96s. And he said, you know what, I'm going to give them 100, and they're going to get at least, hopefully that might bump them up at least another grading point for that semester. So. And
I guess my biggest concern and where I'm going with all this is, what are we going to do next year when that third grader gets moved up to fourth gets moved up to fifth goes to sixth? You know,
we've got some gaps to close, some serious gaps.
Yeah,
yes.
I wonder, are we going to consider remediation? We can talk about that some other time. But that's when I hear people, and I know we have to put a good spin on it, and I think based on what we had to do, this is the best we can do. But you could never replace a classroom teacher. The interaction with those students every day, and that's what I've told parents. They do so much more than teach or do curriculum with them. I mean, they meet their needs where they are. And so,
and it's so much more than online, too. I think that you hear, oh, online, that's going to replace the brick and mortar school. I think this whole experience has really given pause to that as well, because you can only do so much online versus face-to-face.
The parents that I've talked to are ready to hug every one of the teacher's neck. So they now understand the plight of the teacher.
And one thing...
see some support come out of it.
Well, and one thing I want to share with you as well, I don't know how many of you know John Hattie, Ms. Metz, you probably have heard of him. He's an education researcher, but he has done a lot of studies on shutdowns and when hurricanes happen. His most recent study was when they had the Christchurch earthquakes over in the other hemisphere of our world. But he said there is data on the effect of teacher strikes and lengthy shutouts. The message, again, is that effects are very low, especially for students below middle school, but after middle school they increase, and then more so in math. So what he was saying was, and not that this makes me feel a lot better, but he was saying, you know, if it's one shutdown up to 12 weeks, it doesn't have as big of an effect academically as you think it does. But of course, as you hit middle school, it is a little higher of an effect, and then when you deal with math, much more so. But that made me feel a little bit better. But I have a copy of that if you want some not so light reading.
And Dr. Carey, I understand exactly what Mr. Bledsoe was saying, but for me, I don't feel we should penalize a child and give them a 0. My concern is, if you step back, you're doing your packets to learn, not necessarily for the grade. So if they're not completing their packets, they are going to be that much more behind next year. So to me, as a parent, that would be my incentive for my child to do it, is you don't want to be behind
Sure.
next year. And so that's where my heart goes out to those children that don't have that support at home, to encourage them to stay behind them. Or you think about a little small elementary child. I mean, if they don't really have a parent that's going to sit down with that first grader or second grader, it's probably not going to get done. And then they are going to be the little children that are behind next year. So
You're right.
I'm aware of one student that brought to light a fact that I really hadn't really thought about, the effect of being in the classroom. It gave that student, who's a good student, an opportunity to figure it out on his own rather than ask for help. And now he's at home. So he doesn't have that opportunity, so he's having to ask for help. And doesn't really know how to ask for help because he's never had to do it before. So they're missing this classroom instruction material.
That is true.
All right. Any more questions for me?
We're not doing any IEP screenings during any of this, are we?
No, we are not.
Why are we not?
Well, because of the social distancing and getting those students in with the school psychologists, that that's not been a recommendation from the State Department to do that. We are communicating with those families, and we are making sure that that is on our list to do when we get back up and running, but we have not brought folks into the school to do that, because it is a one-on-one process in a lot of cases, and that's not something that we feel like legally we need to be doing.
Yeah, it seems like that would be one of the easiest to abide by situations we could do and get all that behind us before we get hit with everything at the first of the year. Are we doing any kindergarten screening?
No, not at this time. Not at this time.
Well, those things are all easy to do. I mean, we're doing it now. We're bringing teachers back into school and doing different things, so why couldn't we start arranging those things? And you wouldn't have over, 5 or 6 people in any one meeting?
Well, we've been advised by the State Department not to do those things, to do what we can via telephone or via a teleconference or a Zoom, but not to have folks come in for evaluations at this time, and we're awaiting further guidance from them. I mean, it is a pandemic, and I just don't believe it's a good practice, safety-wise, for folks to come in for testing.
Dr. Carey, if I can, let me add something. In the announcement that was made the other day, and then the conference call that we had with the State Department of Education, Mr. Bledsoe, those last 2 weeks that they're giving us some flexibility, and we're still waiting on exactly what that flexibility is going to entail. But she offered 2 or 3 examples of what that may look like, and one of the examples she had is if there was something pressing with an IEP or with a resource student, that during that 2 weeks, as long as you could be socially distanced and you could get the parent and the child in or teacher in, that we had that option to potentially do that. So that could be a possibility as we move forward. Another example she gave of if scheduling has not been done or a child has not completed a schedule and needed to come in and do that, we may be able to do that as well. But the other thing that I would caution is that we've got the summer, and hopefully this thing is going to get better, and it's going to be safer for us to bring students back in our schools. So I think we're going to have some time to do that before the beginning of the following school year.
And I share that, and I appreciate all y'all are doing, but it just seems like there are a few things. I never thought it would go on this long. So I'm optimistic that it's going to get better too, but if it doesn't and we get back to August and we get hit with, maybe somebody's going to say we're going to start a week early and try to do some things. We're going to have a lot left on us if there are some things we can do. If you don't feel safe about it, I guess I understand that, but it just seemed to me like with the facilities we have, we could be doing some of those things. And one other thing, I'll let you go after this. I know that AP has moved the test for our students here, but I was almost amazed. I think that only 2 students responded from an AP request of having Wi-Fi available to take that test. Why can we not make computer labs available on a social distancing basis for our AP students at our facilities on that day? When is it, in the middle of May?
I don't know that the State Department has given us the flexibility to bring students in. That is not something that we've received any directive about at all. Now, we have talked about internally for students who don't have a device, that we can get them a device, we can get them access to Wi-Fi. Maybe they can come to the parking lot of the school where they can access the Wi-Fi in a safe space, in a vehicle. or something of that nature, or we could maybe work on getting them some kind of access to a hot spot if they don't have that. But as far as bringing them in for the test, that is not something we've discussed or that we've had a recommendation to do. I just keep thinking about, I'm looking over at Ms. Ulch with the discussions we've had as far as health and nursing and best practices. That would not be a best practice, not in early May.
Dr. Carey, what are you hearing from the rural districts that don't have the capability of technology?
They're doing a lot of the same things we are with a pencil paper packet because that's all that their students have access to, and frankly, that's the case with a lot of our students as well in some of those more remote areas like Silver Street where they don't have access, and of course there's many, many more. So they're relying just on pencil and paper.
One of the things, too, that we need to consider is just, I mean, if you do bring them in too early, just even the legal ramifications, especially if you're one of those school districts that start early ahead of everybody else. That because I know when they do risk management and insurance, it's usually done on kind of a group basis so that, you know, they give you a guideline of making sure that you have all these things in place and are doing the best that you can. Sure. But I think right now, I mean, over the weekend, we had like 400 and something new cases.
Yeah, and actually, we were going to bring that up, and I'm going to let Ms. Ulch talk to you a little bit about that, but that's another thing, again, and I'll cover this a little bit as we talk about potential graduation options, but that's something that we've all got to keep in mind is that we just had, in the last day or two, one of the highest positive test results that we've had. Based on what I have seen and read, and I think depending upon what news station you're looking at, it may be different, but I think that the prediction of the flattening of the curve or the peak was supposed to be May the 7th or 8th or something like that.
I understand the numbers are going up. The number I think we're missing is how many tests were done. And that percentage of positive to negative, I think, is very important.
Yes, and I think that is a very good point. When you look at total tests so far in South Carolina,
I'm sorry, but the reason I asked her to come to the microphone is we're video streaming and they can't hear her. She's not up here, so I'm sorry.
no, sorry. So the total tests performed in South Carolina are 50,761, when we have a population of a little over 5 million. So I think before, as we move forward, that robust testing is going to be key, for sure.
But wouldn't you agree, the more people you test, the more positive cases you're going to have? We've
That's
seen
my
some,
point.
yeah, we've
Sure.
seen some projections in New York and California that as much as 50%.
That's right.
People are exposed.
And the key will be, as we test more and more, you're right, we're going to see, because we know the numbers are higher out there, but we want to get to a point where we're seeing that downward, again, 14-day trajectory, and where we can reach a point that we're doing so much testing, almost like the flu, that we can do contact tracing. Right now, because there are so many positives and we don't know, the testing is not robust, we're not able to do that. So definitely, as we look for a plan moving forward, once schools do reopen, that's going to be key to be able to do that tracing for sure. And part of that will be the testing for sure.
All right, you said 50,761. That was the number of tests that have been done to date?
Total
South-
tests,
In South
yes.
Carolina?
Yes.
And what's our total positive?
5,000, let's see, that was 490, and add, yes, 5,613 as of today. Mm-hmm. Any other questions for
So
me?
are we still just, in this particular numbers that we're looking at, just testing people that are presenting symptoms?
Yes. Yes. So then we miss our asymptomatic
That's right.
people. But again, if we get that robust testing in place, then hopefully we can help with that. Any other questions or
No,
concerns?
I've got family members who are in healthcare, and they say that South Carolina is just now getting to the point where they're starting to get adequate test kits so that they can test more, and so that we'll have a truer sense of what's going on.
Which will be key.
Right.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
You finished? Okay. All right.
sir.
Thank you, Dr. Carey. All right, Mr. Haney will update us on operations.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Suber, I bring to you an update on our continuity of operations. Couple updates for you, started with deep cleaning and disinfecting. Our custodial company, ABM, and with also the help of the Bud Group, finished all the disinfecting last week with the electrostatic sprayer equipment. So that's every campus has been completed. And of course, we look to have to do that process again in the future. A second update, our meal planning. I want to say again a special thanks to Ms. Barnes and her child nutrition staff for all the hours of work and dedication they've put into this planning. And of course, we've also had great support from our transportation department. We're continuing to serve on Mondays, and I will go ahead and make this announcement. The week of Memorial Day, we do want to observe Memorial Day and take that day off. So we'll actually move that serving on the next day, Tuesday, instead of serving on that Monday. And we will put this out as far as an announcement to the community. At your places, you actually have a spreadsheet that shows you a breakdown of our meals served, starting with March the 18th. Everybody have that? Okay. If you go down the page, our highest total, and you got a couple columns there, breakfast and lunch, and then you got those columns totaled, and you see a breakdown of the school serving sites. which are Mid-Carolina High School, Newberry High, Newberry Middle, Palmer Garmany, Reuben, and Whitmire Community School. And of course, some of these meals are being taken on our buses to additional sites, but this is just a list of school sites where all those meals are being prepped and coming from. Our highest total was March the 30th. If you'll look down toward the bottom of your first page, we served 37,450 meals, and kind of why that stands out, that was also the day we gave out instructional packets at the school, so that we kind of, instruction and operations worked together, and that was our highest total. So we had a line of parents coming to get one-stop shopping, instructional packets and meals. The next 2 weeks, April 6th and also April 13th, those two Mondays were during our spring break holiday, and so you do see those totals kind of decrease there. And we actually had a decrease last Monday. That was not a so good weather day. We had a lot of rain that day, so we think that probably hinders some people coming out, and that number kind of remained the same today. You actually have today's totals. We had a little bit of a drop there also, but so far, up until today, we have a total of 170,126 meals served to our community. Any questions for operations?
I would say to you or to Ms. Barnes, how do you plan for such variations from 37,000 to 22,000?
Oh, me, that's a magic formula.
Did you have 37,000 on that week?
That's been the biggest challenge, is we don't know how many parents or how many families are going to serve, but we're very blessed that we've got meal kits now. We've got like breakfast meal kits and lunch meal kits that are shelf-stable. So we've got a surplus of those, so we spend holiday, it number goes up.
Okay.
So a lot of thanks to, like I said, Child Nutrition for their work and the support of the Transportation Department for assisting. They're doing an excellent job.
So much for parts.
That's a good point. Facilities management is assisting. They're delivering food out to the schools, and we purchased the old food line at the right time. It's almost reopened again, but the loading dock and just the space has been tremendous during this time. All right. Any other questions?
I guess, assuming like the first week through all the way up, I guess, through the end of the 26th, where the numbers were a lot lower, and then they start picking up and stay more consistent. That's just because the word now is completely
Well,
gotten
also,
out,
if you'll look to the side over there, you know, we've kind of transitioned into different plans. We started off with 1 meal per child. That was for 1 day.
Right.
Then we transitioned to giving 3 days worth, and then 2 days worth. That's when we were serving twice a week. And then to transition towards spring break, we went to once a week. So
Okay.
that made a difference too.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Hunter, with Transportation.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Super. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to share just a little bit about transportation. Basically, from our previous month, our update is pretty much the same. Our numbers are the same for our drivers as well as our aides on the bus. I also want to note, in the Whitmire area, we had to shut down one of our areas due to the attendance being low. So our students are being fed actually at the school. And I want to thank Ms. Stribble and her staff for contacting those parents and notified them of that change as well. They did a great job of that. That's pretty much all that I have. Everything's intact. I want to once again thank our aides and our bus drivers for working in the trenches for our students, make sure they're being fed throughout the week, and also continue to pray for our students as well as our faculty and staff during this pandemic as well as our community. Are there any questions for transportation?
How are you doing on maintenance, on bus maintenance during this time? Are you continuing with that, or are you upping it, or are you kind of?
We're continuing with our schedule that we currently have when it comes to fueling and actually upkeep on the buses as well.
Do you alternate buses, or are the drivers using the same buses every day?
They're using the same buses. And they're also, we've gotten the chemicals to make sure we spray down our buses as well.
Do you believe, as I do, that busing will be the primary concern starting school in August?
Yes, sir. Definitely with the shortage that we actually have in drivers, as well as having that amount of students in that one setting. Yes. Yes, sir. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right. Mr. Allen?
Okay, as far as the continuity of finance, we are moving forward as usual. There have been no issues. We've had our regularly scheduled accounts payable runs, and we've had our regularly scheduled payrolls. Obviously, that's changed and looks different because we mail everything now versus our principals coming to pick that up. But so far, so good with that. Our staff, as far as staff's concerned, finance is pretty much rocking and rolling. That's something that we've They mostly come in. Like I told you before, they do have capabilities to work from home if they do need to be at home, but for the most part, they are coming in every day and working. The other thing that is continuing, we didn't know how we were going to do it, but we have an interim audit going on right now. This is the time of year that our auditors come for interim. Instead of being in our office right now, we are sending everything electronically that they are needing. So that's taking a little more time. We're having to copy everything and send it electronically instead of just hand it to them and then bring it back to us. But so far, so good. It's working out great. They're doing a lot of working from home themselves. Our auditors are. So it's just a kind of a new normal right now as far as all of this is concerned. So, but finance is going well. And I'll answer any questions about that you might have.
I don't have a question about the audit, but I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more, if you know about the CARES Act, because
yes.
I know there's supposed to be a webinar coming up and that about the possibility of the district being reimbursed for some things.
Well, we are definitely a part of the CARES Act funding. We have been told our estimated amount for CARES Act funding is going to be $1.7 million. That does have to be applied for, and the state has an application process for that. So that is an estimated amount. I have not heard when we will actually receive those funds, but just so you know, they are extremely flexible with how we can spend those funds. So we have a lot of options. However, because of the fact that we are potentially looking at a decreased revenue whenever the state does come back and gives us a budget, we are being very deliberate in careful in how we are going to plan to use those funds. You can use them for a lot of different things, but one of the things is operations. And I'll give you a for instance, and I've talked to other districts about this. If you were to use those CARES Act funds to pay your utility bills, that's going to free up funds to make sure that you can keep your people employed and your teachers in the classroom and maybe not have to furlough. Because, y'all, we don't know what this funding is going to look like, statewide and locally. So those funds, along with the $45 million that the state is getting, they are planning to potentially help districts out. One of the big things that we'll be able to use those funds for is cleaning and sanitizing and things like that, so that we can be sure that when we do come back to school that we have everything in place, because you are going to have extra cleaning, extra everything for them to come back. So we are going to be very deliberate in how we use those CARES Act funds.
Okay. The webinar that they're going to have, I think it was April 30th from 12:30 to 1:30. Is that strictly just for the administrators, or is that something for us as a board that would be good information?
I have not
for
seen the
us, or-
agenda, actually. I do know that they're going to have that webinar that day. That's the School Boards Association, correct? Mm-hmm.
Yes, and John Payne with the State Department, who is kind of the mastermind behind the stimulus funds and what we're going to be able to do with them, is going to be one of the primary players. And, yeah, I think all of you received that email. I think all of you can sign up for that webinar. I think it's open to everybody. And if you can't watch it during that time frame, we had this discussion this morning, but it is going to be posted on their website. So if you've got a conflict and you can't watch it live, you can watch it after the fact.
Yes.
Like on the School Board Association website?
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that if you watch the actual webinar, it says that you have to register beforehand.
Yes, that's correct.
Also, at your places, in regards to the audit, you just have some general information from Green Finney that is for you to be able to read, to just talk a little bit about what they do during our audit process.
Good question about the audit. I know a lot of times they spend a lot of time and effort at our schools.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at student count.
They do. What they rely on, though, is us to go to the schools a lot, and we do that to try to mitigate the risk of having people activities located at our schools. So we obviously do that. It's been a little bit different now. We haven't been able to get out as much as we had intended. However, we will continue to do that, and if they need to go into any of our schools, depending on what it looks like, in the fall when they come for our end of year audit, I mean, obviously we don't know. We may be doing the exact same thing again and sending them everything electronically. I don't know what that looks like, if things will get better and then we have to deal with this again. I don't know. I don't even want to say it. But we are definitely going to work with them and make sure that they've got everything they need in order to have a good audit.
I guess I'd tie this in with budget and everything else, but I trust you. I have a lot of confidence in you. A man told me a long time ago, the best way you can tell what somebody's going to do is look at what they have done. And you have been reliable, and I trusted you with continuing resolutions or anything else. But what you just said is what we're all very much aware of. Mike Sheely said this week that they had an economic forecast of a 60% reduction in the fourth quarter for revenue for the state, and he said he thought that was optimistic.
Yeah, I like Mike Sheely.
I
think that's somebody we can trust.
And he speaks plainly.
He does, and he did the school board's webinar last week, and we actually watched that.
By the way, you can view that one as well. That one's posted on the website as well.
Yeah, he's been to several different conferences and spoke, and I think he does try to keep a pretty good handle on and keeps his finger on that. So I agree with you. Okay. Any questions for finance as far as how we're doing there? Should we proceed with the cash flow report then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You should have the March cash flow report in your packets. The prior month's balance was $26 million. Deposits were $3.9 million. Claims were $5.6 million. And at the end of the month for March, we had $24.4 million. Broken down by fund, this was $16.7 million general fund, $3.3 million federal projects, $3.8 million EIA funds, other state restricted funds, $760,000. Again, the end of March for March 20 is $24.4 million. Couple of pages over, we have the technology and construction funds report. We did not have any payables for the month of March, and our ending balance for that this month was last month was $771,000. Behind this information is our general fund revenue and expenditure reports. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer those at this time. Okay. Budget update?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We've talked a lot about it already. However, I did want to remind you then that we mentioned last month that we are not planning to have our budget work sessions. First one was to to have been April the 20th. Obviously, that has passed. The second one was to have been May the 11th. We at this time, because we've passed a continuing resolution and have no new budget information to provide, don't feel that we need to add any extra meetings at this time. So therefore, the April 20th, the May 11th, and also we have been told by the School Boards Association that because this is a continuing resolution budget, we do not need to have a public hearing. It is just a continuation of our last year's budget, so that will also be taken off of your calendar. So the only thing that we would still have remaining are our regular board meetings. Okay?
Would it be your intent when we find out something from the state, even if it's July, August, we're going to actually have formal budget meetings then?
Yes, I do think so. As we get information, because I'm hopeful that we will get something. They are not planning. They're having to come back before June 30th to actually finalize the continuing resolution that did not get finalized at their last meeting and finalize sine die and everything. But when they come back, what we're looking at is the potential of them getting back in around September or so. And we're understanding that they're going to have a very, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but in my past experiences for the budget process, they've had a lot of months to get it worked out. I'm not seeing where they're going to have a lot of months to get it worked out, and they're going to be pretty quick, or their calendar shows they're going to be pretty quick about trying to get a budget passed. So yes, we will definitely be keeping you updated at our meetings as to if we do have to have any additional meetings for anything. As I get information, I will definitely pass it to you guys.
Questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And now it's time for our superintendent's report.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chairman, members of the board, before I move to item A, and some of you are already aware of this or have maybe read some of it somewhere, but on April the 14th, we were contacted by the State Department, and they wanted to send a survey for all the superintendents in the state of South Carolina to give some opinions as to what the future would look like for the rest of the school year. And I think some of this information and feedback was being generated for the governor's office. So between Governor McMaster and Superintendent Spearman, they could make a determination as to how the rest of the school year looked as far as K-12 goes. And it was a very short survey. There weren't but 3 questions. I won't read each one of them word for word, but the first one was that if you're given a choice, what would you prefer? And it was 3 options. It was either return to school on May the 18th, return to school on May the 26th, or not return to school this year. And 65% of the superintendents in the state said not return to school this year, basically, again, looking at the numbers and looking where the peak season was going to be, and also looking at the fact that as superintendents and administrators and principals and teachers, you're going to be responsible for keeping those people safe, and with the social distancing requirements, it was virtually totally impossible to keep children safe by putting them back in school that early. So that decision was made, and we do appreciate the governor and the State Department of Education for taking into consideration the results that they got. The second one, and this is probably the biggest elephant in the room, is does your district have a contingency plan in place for high school and other graduation ceremonies that you'd be willing to share if we put together, or for us to put together, a best practice document, meaning something from the State Department. So I can't tell you how many superintendents responded. I can tell you that this superintendent did respond. As a matter of fact, I actually called the State Department and talked to Ryan Brown and shared the different options that we had spoken about. And nothing, absolutely nothing at this point in time is set in stone. And again, that was requested from us on April the 14th. So on the day prior to the announcement that Superintendent Spearman and Governor McMaster made, which was the 22nd, I think the results were tabulated, and as a result of that meeting, it was decided to close schools for the remainder of the year on April the 22nd. And then, as we had heard earlier today, there was a comment made that the last 2 weeks of the school year, we're going to give you some flexibility. We're going to let you go through some things where you can close out. And what I was referring to a minute ago, Mr. Bledsoe, Superintendent Spearman did make a couple of comments about here are some examples of things you could do. And one of the things, and one of the major things that have got to be done is not only that we've got to collect all of the rest of the packets, but at the same time, if we've got students that have textbooks at home or textbooks in their lockers, we're going to have to get those. These textbooks are very expensive, and when they're not turned in, it is the responsibility of the school to pay that, and there can be some enormous amounts of money that we're asked to pay back. So that is key. We're not a one-to-one district, but the one-to-one districts, as far as technology devices, we're extremely worried about not being able to get their devices back. So during that 2 weeks of flexibility, we have the option, our principals have the option to set times, and again, we've got to do it being cognizant of social distancing. So we can't just bring, I'm going to throw an example out there, we can't just say all ninth graders at Newberry High School need to come on Tuesday to clean out your lockers, because you're going to have all those kids in one wing. So our principals are going to have to be strategic as to how they roll that out in the increments of maybe at 8 o'clock one group comes, 9 o'clock another group comes, and somebody's going to have to be responsible for making sure that we've got social distancing taking place when we do that. So that's just an option of some of the flexibility that we have been given. And I talked a little bit about the possibility if there was an IEP that needed to take place, or we need to meet with parents about scheduling or something like that, we're going to leave that up to the principals. The second thing, item B, the retirement dinner is scheduled for May the 14th. Obviously, now we're not even going to be allowed to be in school, so our buildings are closed, and we cannot have the retirement on the reception on that date. We did talk this morning, and I assure you we are going to properly honor our retirees, but we're going to postpone that until further notice. And if we've got to move on into the summer, and we may not get exactly the participation, but when it's clear and we feel like that we can do it, we will have a reception for those retirees, because they put in a large number of years and been faithful employees of this school district, and we're going to properly honor them. Item C is graduation schedules and / alternate plans are in progress. Some of you have gotten some emails. We get phone calls. Our principals get phone calls. And there are some districts, and I'm not going to throw any of our fellow districts under the proverbial bus, but when Superintendent Spearman made the comment that the 2 weeks, I want you guys to be thinking about what you're going to do for graduation, a lot of people jumped out there and put plans out and publicized it, and at least 2, I think maybe 3 of those districts has now had to pull them back because it was a little bit too early, and maybe they didn't have proper permission, or at least the people in the community were not pleased with what they were doing. So we are going to move judiciously, and it is on purpose. We're not withholding information from anybody, but right now we cannot lay out, this is what we're going to do, item A, this is what we're going to do if B, until we have vetted this entire process, until we have numbers, and we still have no updates from DHEC, who will be involved in our decision. The State Department will be involved in our decision with graduation, and the purpose of this survey was to produce a best practice memo to give to the superintendents and for the districts to look at and say, okay, here are the 4 graduation options that they feel like they can support. We do not have that document yet, and we will follow up on that. But I think ultimately it's going to be our decision to choose from those options as to what we feel like is in the best interest of our school district. And the thing about it is, across the state of South Carolina, what is good for Newberry County may not be good for Horry County, and vice versa. Greenville can do some things that maybe we can't do just because of facilities. So what we have to do is look at our own facilities, the space that we have, the personnel that we've got, and what we feel like we can do that is going to, number 1, provide a quality graduation ceremony for every deserving senior in this school district, and we are going to do that, but we're going to have to potentially have some flexibility. And when I say that, one of the things, and some of the people have already done this and scheduled it, depending upon what these positive cases come back to be, I mean, if I sit here today and tell you, okay, on June the, whatever it is, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, or whatever our 3 graduation dates are, we're going to have this, that, and the other, and 3 weeks from now, we've got 2 or 3 days of a spike, and they're saying you really don't need to be bringing a whole lot of people into one place, then you've got a situation on your hands. So we're going to, again, try to wait as long as we can, but obviously we do understand that we're going to have to get it out there and tell what our initial plans are. So we're meeting with our principals in the morning. We have been talking to principals now for 3-4 weeks on this, getting ideas from them. We're going to throw 4 different options out to them, and we're going to discuss that. I hope it doesn't take as long as it did this staff, because like I say, we've been talking about it for a month, and I just want you to think about this. We've been in every cabinet meeting we've been in for the last month, we have had a conversation about graduation. Every time we've had our principals, whether it was here individually, whether it was here as a group, or whether we talked to them on the phone, email, we've had conversations about graduation and associated activities. This morning in our cabinet meeting, we had about an hour and a half to discuss everything that was going on tonight, and the last 2 things on the agenda were graduation. That was about 3 hours worth. We started at 9 and we got out at 2 o'clock. So it takes a lot of conversation to try to get to a point as to, do you really feel like, and there's a lot of back and forth, pros and cons, and sometimes you got to take your administrator hat off, and I don't mind telling you what I told my staff this morning. I want you to take your administrator hat off. And as we discuss these graduations or potential graduations, I want you to think that every one of you have a graduating senior, and what would you want to see done for that senior this year? And that is, for the next 2 hours, the premise that we talked under. But we will meet with our principals tomorrow. We will give them input as to exactly what those options look like and what the potential option 1, option 2, option 3 is. And then once we talk to them about that, and we'll have to do a special session. We'll have to get you guys back in here in the next 10 to 14 days and lay it out to you and give you what those new numbers are at that point in time. And we're going to have to go ahead and if we're going to change a date, we need to get it out there and change it. I don't mind telling you there is an option on the table that if things have not gotten better, if the curve has not been flattened and the positive cases are not going down, if DHEC is not recommending that we bring large crowds and gatherings in, then do we have an option of moving into the month of July and potentially doing something in July? I'm not saying that's what we're going to do, but we've got to have a lot of options on the table. So the options would be something as simple as nobody can come but the graduate and whoever's performing the ceremony, the graduate and X number of people inside, the graduate and X number of people outside, or a total virtual graduation. And right now, those are probably the prevalent 4 choices that every school district in this state has on the table right now. We're not going to make that decision tonight. There's really not a whole lot of if this, if that. We need to talk to our principals first, make sure they've got buy-in. And the other thing is, I'm going to direct our principals tomorrow that they need to have some conversation with their seniors. They need to talk to their seniors, whether it be through their student council, whether it be through the student government in the 12th grade, whether it's picking up the phone or sending out something to those seniors. But the seniors needs to have some input in this as well, but understanding that the final decision will be a recommendation from this superintendent and this cabinet to the Board of Education, and we're all in this together, and we're all going to be on the same page, and we're all going to have to live with the decision that we make. But my commitment, very firmly, is within the realm of possibility of what the medical professionals tell us we can do, what our local state organization, our State Department of Education, the governor's office, what they give us the flexibility to do. We will make a decision that will honor our seniors as well as we can honor them, and that is my promise. Any questions?
I would like to add, these are, and that's been my response to folks that have emailed me, texted me, called me. We will do the best job we can for our graduates. I would just encourage, as y'all make these decisions and you come up with a recommendation, that all 3 schools are as close together as possible. I know that Whitmire's a little bit different because it's small. I know that our graduation at Mid Carolina is a little different than Newberry, but this year, I would like to see those graduations mirror each other as much as possible. That way we don't get in, well, they did this, why couldn't we? And that's a major concern.
We've had some of that conversation as well, Mr. Ham.
Just so you get my 2 cents worth while we're talking about it, I very much support an outside graduation with a rain date because we moved them in because of rain. So if we can't do it that evening, maybe we can do it next morning. I have come to the conclusion, though, that it is viable and it is possible if all conditions, I agree with you about a date on it. But I think the safety of an event is only as good as your security, because this is going to be an emotional time. I don't care if nobody but the graduating class gets to be there. But I'd like to see 2 or 3 parents or whatever we can do for that. But there's going to be some people that are going to try to crash in and mess that up. So we have to consider all those things, and I know y'all do.
We had the security conversation this morning as well.
And from the classmates I've talked to, they just want to see each other. They didn't get to say goodbye to everybody. They're keeping up with their closest friends, but they didn't see the other ones. And, of course, you could go on that list. There's siblings that want to be there, and there's teachers that want to be there and all that. So we'll have to make some tough decisions about it. And that's why I think the safety is going to be a big concern, however we do it.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad to know that you all
Yes,
have
ma'am.
considered outside, maybe outside.
Absolutely.
That's one of the
It is one of the options that we have on paper already. Yes, ma'am.
I would agree with what Mr. Bledsoe said, that, most of what I've been hearing, and even from some of the seniors, which I was glad to hear you say that you were going to be consulting them.
No, I said the principals were going to be consulting them.
The principals, the
Right.
school district.
I just don't want every senior in Newberry to think I'm half done. We're going to divide the energy a little bit, okay?
That's right. But the things that I am hearing back is that even if it comes down to that parents can't because of security measures or the social distancing measures or whatever, that with what Mr. Bledsoe said, that the thing I'm hearing, it seems like between all the people, is that the kids would like the opportunity, if nothing else, to have that one last hurrah with each other, even if they're distancing, which to me and again, I know you're going to look at all options, but I would think that would be a lot harder to do if you did it indoors versus doing it outdoors.
Certainly. Any other comments?
Well, one suggestion that was made, we moved them inside because we kept hitting the afternoon thunder showers, that if we end up deciding that outside is best, that maybe we move the times of our graduations to the morning.
Already done.
Might not have as much chance for those showers, thunder showers to come in.
Already done. Any other questions? Okay. And the last thing in item D under the superintendent's report is our administrative retreat is tentatively scheduled for June the 30th here from 8 to 3. It probably will look a little bit different. Normally we bring our entire staff administratively, and that's not just principals, but this may be a situation where if we still got some social distancing going on, that either we do a 2-part thing and bring 2 different groups, or either do we just scale it down and it would be cabinet and principals and directors in the buildings and not go any further than that, and we can certainly do some other professional development with those other staff members at a later date. But we'll be at somebody else's mercy as to the number of people that we can bring into the building at one time. Any questions for me? All right. Thank you.
All right, do I have a motion to enter into executive session?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.